Hi all, welcome to the first podcast for Agile Active. At Agile Active, Agile is at the heart of everything we do. We are an Agile training, transformation, and leadership consultancy that coaches teams, leaders, and enterprise to sustainably enhance their product development and delivery leadership. We will, on this podcast, regularly invite industry leaders to talk about their agile journeys and experiences they've had while they were on that journey. This will help our viewers to get insights on, different forms of agile journeys that different leaders have taken. Today, I'm personally very excited to introduce someone who I've been working with for a while and I feel is a giant of the industry. We are hosting Rui Silva today, who's the CTO for commercial lending at HSBC. Rui has worked across industries in travel, retail, and finance, as well as worked for startups and global organizations. He is a technologist at heart who uses technology as a means of delivering business value. I've had the pleasure of working with him, like I said, and have always found it to be a great journey. Rui, welcome, and I'm so glad to have you here.
Hi, Schlock. It's great to be here.
And it's great to have you, Rui. I'm so excited that you've decided to come and talk to our viewers, and I'm sure they're going to get loads of information. Uh, Rui, one of the things that most organizations or most people have in their mind when they hear the word agile is what does it really mean? Because it almost seems like agile has different meaning for different people. So, as a start, it'd be great to understand what you think an organization means when you talk about agility.
So, based on my experience, most organizations still confuse, and you touch this point of technology versus change, right?
Yeah.
In my experience, many organizations think that agile is just an IT concept, right? So, and they don't, they don't project agility as an organization
True.
kind of objective.
Yeah.
Um, so, and it's not uncommon, and agile is a journey.
Hmm.
So it's not uncommon to effectively the organizations think of agile as a delivery framework,
True.
and not something as value driven, aligned and mapped with value streams, for example, as an
Yeah.
example. So I would say the industries is different industries, and different industries are in different stages, but I would say we are still in that process of moving from agile is just technical IT. This is not something that I'm worried about. I'm expecting the PowerPoint, the roadmap, this and that. We are in that transition of some organizations realizing that agile is a collective thing, and if you don't have the business, if you don't have all the departments working in an agile way,
Yeah.
I don't think you will be able to make the most of it, right, in terms of benefits and delivering value for the organization.
True, and that is so true, right? We've talked about this a few times that agile is not really iterative delivery, but actually a mindset that we need to get into. Thanks, Rui. That's great to know. Kind of takes me a bit to my second question that I think our viewers would really like to understand, and this kind of focuses a bit on you as to when did you first start on the agile journey? What has your experience been like?
So I've been in contact with agile concepts for many years. I would say
Mm.
maybe we are probably talking 20 years ago or maybe more.
Yeah.
But the first, I would say, significant agile, I would not say implementation, but organization, in the sense of the first time I've seen
Hmm.
agile implemented at scale was in a travel industry organization,
Yeah.
mid-size 500 people organization, where it was still not perfect. And again, going back to the initial question, your previous question,
Hmm.
um, there was still that gap between IT and business. But it was the first time I've seen business stakeholders getting closer and closer to the IT teams, and starting to work and think as one team and not as separate teams. So I would say back to 2012, it was my first experience in the real world of an agile model,
Okay.
or an organization of a significant size in the other agile journey.
And that's another great part of having you here, right? Because we don't have to stick to industry. You worked in travel, you worked in fintechs, you worked in big global organizations. So we have kind of a whole array of industries that you've worked in. So Rui, just sort of building up on that question a bit. Can you tell us what, or can you point out what you think is a typical agile journey that an organization takes on right now, and what is the typical journey it should ideally take?
Right. So interesting question. So my experience, some organizations just jump into agile because it's the new trend, right? They, again, as we discussed, they don't really understand sometimes they understand that, you know, they have to try something different, maybe because they are facing some issues or some challenges. But then, I think they just jump into concept and they start adopting again the scrums, the kanbans, the delivery models, kind of
Yeah,
parking everything else because the perception is, in some cases, that it's IT that is not delivering, right?
true.
Ideally,
Hmm.
ideally, in my view, an organization should start by identifying that there is an issue, right? In the sense of the waterfall models
Hmm.
come with a number of constraints, right?
True.
And one of the things that I use in my jobs and with my teams is and with colleagues and stakeholders and business
Hmm.
colleagues is sometimes use specific examples.
Yeah.
And maybe 20, 30, 40 years ago, you could
Hmm.
define a strategy, a 3-year, 4-year, 5-year strategy,
Yeah.
and that strategy would stay, let's say, uh, persistent, right? So it,
Yeah.
it would it would not change significantly.
True.
In today's world, with the competition, with kind of the dynamics, how things work, very fast-paced markets and competitors,
Hmm.
you cannot afford that. So your strategy will change maybe every 6 months, maybe in a smaller organization, in a startup, for example, maybe every 3 months. It depends. So one of the examples I use in the organization is to say, you see, this is why waterfall does not work, or the classical models do not work, because it's not just about you, it's
Yeah.
also about some variables and some actors that are outside your control. So
True.
you will have to change your strategy because your competitors are moving very quickly. It's not a choice, right? It's you have to do it.
Yeah.
So I think the ideal journey,
Hmm.
I would say, first, the organization identifies that they need something different.
Okay.
Second, before they jump into models and frameworks,
Yeah.
they look at their culture
True.
and they look at their mindset, right?
Yeah.
And they think of their organization as one organization. And obviously there are a number of implications when I say this. When I say
Yeah.
one, means no silos, no, I mean, the reporting lines exist, we know that, but
Yeah.
when you are working on an initiative, it's everyone should be working, be on the same boat, right? So parking silos, embracing empowerment, it's something that I still see some challenges in some organizations, right? So in my view, empowerment means your teams, if
Yeah.
you selected your people, the best people possible that
Yeah.
were in the market, then they will be the best experts in delivering a specific bit
Yeah.
of a solution, right? So
Yeah.
trust them, trust that experience, trust that they are capable, and then empower them and get
Yeah.
out of the way. Let them do their job, and obviously keep a close eye in the sense of be supporting, if be open.
Yeah.
But in the end, it's about, for me, it's about trust,
Hmm.
empowerment, getting out of the way, and then once you get the culture right, I think
Yeah.
that is the point where you can start discussing initiatives, you can start discussing roadmaps, you can start discussing teams, people, frameworks, right? Will it be Scrum or Kanban, or will it be Safe or something else? but
True.
but don't, in my opinion, organizations should do their homework before they get to that stage. If it makes
Yeah,
sense.
and it is so interesting, right? Because most organizations actually start the other way around. They start with a framework they want to implement or iterative delivery that they want to do, and probably never get to the culture side of things, and which is like you mentioned is extremely important and kind of tends to the next question or next thought process I wanted to talk about was when you're designing an agile tom, it sometimes gets very hard, especially in large organizations, to break silos. Is there anything in particular you found to be more useful than others, or is there a particular way you would suggest that organizations should go? And I know it touches a bit on the culture and the mindset piece, but I just thought I'll bring it up again and we can talk a bit more in detail about it.
Yeah, I think culture is the, let's say, the magical recipe, because if you get culture right,
Hmm.
then everything else will follow, if it makes sense. So
Yeah.
I think it's important to make sure that people are properly trained, that
Yeah.
they use similar terminology, for example, that they are familiar with the concepts. But at the end of the day, and again going back to the previous question, if you don't have culture right,
Yeah.
you will. And Schlock, one of the things that I wonder myself sometimes is if even the training, even whatever uh, programs you find out there are
Hmm.
not very delivery focused, and that tailors, let's say, the leadership view, right? Because if,
Yeah.
if I'm a leader and I attend a course and I'm trying to get familiar with agile concepts,
Yeah.
and suddenly everything is about scrum and sprints, and maybe as a leader I'm not getting the right perspective. So even I would say on the training side,
Yeah.
you have to change perspective, right? So you have to make sure you get the right trade, a comprehensive
Yeah.
program
Yeah.
that focus on all aspects of agile and not just delivery.
I feel that SAFE in that way actually does look at not only the ceremonies and the sprints, but just as an example, there's a complete chapter on leadership. There's a complete chapter on how to handle your portfolios. But we'll not go into particular methodologies right now. But you're right in the idea that the training cannot only be about tools and techniques when you're trying to change mindsets, right?
Yeah, it's also about, in my view, there is also a gap where how do you link vision, right? So
Hmm.
how do you go to the highest, um, I was going to call it artifact. It's not an artifact, but the highest uh, v- concept of what you are trying to achieve. How
Yeah.
do you link that back to the teams, to the pods, irrespective of what framework you are using? But
Yeah.
how do you make it an end-to-end journey, which is something very common to in banking, for example, to talk about end-to-end journeys. So
Yeah.
in Agile, same principle. How do you go from end to end, meaning from vision to delivery, and everything makes sense, and it goes through all the levels of management and all the teams, right?
True, and that is very important. And SAFE per se has something called the big picture, which kind of talks about that gradient slope which you need to go on. And again, different frameworks might have different approaches, but I think SAFE in general kind of covers the holistic picture of going from an enterprise level right down to a team level, because I don't think any of these can exist in silos. You cannot be agile only at an enterprise level, and you cannot be agile only at the team level. So I agree. Yeah, and there is a training, requirement there, which needs to be fulfilled, and probably leadership teams not only have to ensure that training itself is or good training itself is provided, but once people are trained and they come back to an environment, that environment needs to be nurturing, right? Otherwise the training would go to waste.
Absolutely. And when we touch on culture,
Hmm.
it's again all levels of the organization. So you need a shift of culture, maybe at the, again using IT as an example, at the developers level,
Yeah.
because they are used to work in a kind of big bang deliveries and releases, etc.
Yeah.
But if you go up in the organization, it's also about, when I say culture shift, is about, again, leaders empowering teams and their teams, right? So if that does not happen, then
True.
the whole, again, the end-to-end agile journey will not be smooth, right? So yeah.
Yeah, and that's a great thought. And with that thought, Rui, basically one of the things that I've been thinking about, and I know we've discussed in not on this podcast, but in general in our many conversations, is that how how the concept of agility differs in different firms, especially when scale comes into play, right? So, how does a fintech define agility? Versus how does a big organization define agility? Because both of them have different challenges, different areas to master, and different outputs that they're looking for. So if you could give us a view, because you worked on both sides of the world, if you could give us a view on what you think is the best way for, or what do you think is the difference, and how they actually need to tackle this.
Yeah, so it interesting question, right? So if you look at a startup, it's a smaller organization, so in nature you would expect it to be less bureaucratic,
True.
fewer silos. Um, Depending on the stage of the startup, that also influences. So I'll give you an example. If you are building a business from scratch,
Yeah.
you don't have revenue coming in.
Yeah.
The mindset is get stuff done, and this comes with positives and with less positives, negatives.
Yeah.
The positives are get stuff done means you have to be agile, and the whole organization is agile. And if you have to, you have the CEO very close to the project and the ceremonies and all that.
Hmm.
If the organization is scaling up,
Yeah.
um, then I would say this is what in this transition, this is the risk where you have to make sure that you don't go to the default IT versus business, right? Because when you are in the stage where you don't have revenue,
Yeah.
everyone is in the same boat because the mindset is a bit of a survival mindset, right? So it's
Yeah.
almost like all or nothing, everyone wins or everyone loses.
Hmm.
Once you scale up, I think you have to be cautious and make sure that you don't fall in some of the traps, right?
Okay.
Um, so I would say be careful that the business does not go away because you are now making some revenue, and so it seems like delivery is not as important as when you were building the business.
Yeah.
Make sure that you don't fall into that trap. Um, what is common, I think, in startups and in some fintechs
Hmm.
is because the pace is so high, right? Such a high paced environment,
Hmm.
and because again because you are more efficient or organizations tend to be more efficient,
Hmm.
you tend to, because things are going well, you tend to park parts of the agile concept, right? Which is you have to continue to learn, right? So
Yeah.
you should make your retrospectives anyway,
Yeah.
irrespective if your project is going amazing and you are, everything is on track.
True.
Don't skip the retrospectives, because if you skip them you are not learning, and if you are not learning you are not improving. So
True.
I would say in smaller organizations this is the risk, right? The risk is such a high pace environment
Hmm.
that you may start skipping some steps of the agile process or even journey.
Yeah.
Bigger organizations, that's where you will see, the gap again between business and IT is probably wider. You Because the organization is bigger, you have, decision making process is slower, you have more stakeholders involved.
Yeah.
uh, it gets more difficult to get to increase the pace, if it makes
True.
sense. But it's again, agile is a journey, right? And maybe
Yeah.
bigger organizations go slower,
Yeah.
smaller organizations go faster. But as long as you are going in the right direction, and as long as again you continue to learn, so continuous learning,
Yeah.
you should stay in that journey. Um,
That's a great thought. And generally when you think about fintechs, you actually automatically think, oh, they would be agile just by the nature of their work. But you make a very good point that in the haste of doing things, they might actually be missing on some fairly important ceremonies, which shouldn't. Obviously, not all fintechs, some of them, but it's a great point. And it's a view that that'll help us think that agile is not, or agility, or the concept of agility is not only centered around big organizations, but goes through every organization should be embracing it, and in some way or form should be following the the charted out path, which can lead them to a better version of their agility. You can always make it better, right? Like you said.
Yeah. There's also something common between both, right? The small ones and the big ones, which is in today's world, you are not, your organization is not an island, right? So you tend to have partnerships with external companies, with third parties, with regulators. Is, for example, financial services are obviously a key stakeholder. So it's also important to in my opinion, to acknowledge
Yeah.
that in the agile journey, you don't have to be, it's not all or nothing, again,
True.
right? So I'll give an example with financial services regulators or with third parties companies. It might be hard or harder to
Hmm.
convince them to work in the way you want,
True.
right? So you may need a bit of um, I will call it, I usually call it a translation layer. So
Okay.
if a third party is expecting something, a report in a specific format that is not really agile,
Hmm.
you may need a translation layer there, right? But you should not compromise your main um, model, right? So your the way you work,
Yeah.
the ways of working should not be compromised because of that. It's not, again, it's not an all or nothing situation, right? So you can make it work even with third parties, and even maybe help them. And I've done this in especially smaller organizations.
Yeah.
Help third parties to come closer to the way you work. It will not never be perfect,
Yeah.
but it's possible.
That's a very interesting, because that's also an excuse we hear a lot, right? That our vendors are not following agile, or our customers, in this case regulators, are not being agile. So, and you're right, and it's an interesting concept to have a translation layer that can actually not compromise your own model, but go ahead and still deliver the benefits that you're required to do. That's a great thought, Rui. But I know we've talked a lot about the positives and things that went well. But how about things that haven't gone well for you personally in the agile journey? Obviously, what do you think is the place that you've seen either yourselves or the organizations that you were working with tripping the most? What are those pitfalls that organizations need to be very, very careful of?
I think what one of the things I've seen is because organizations are trying to, again, they are in the agile journey, but sometimes other parts of the organization are not agile.
Yeah.
Sometimes your, let's say, the agile part of your organization, the way it gets impacted by the other bits of, but the other parts of the other teams in the
Hmm.
organization. And I'll give a classical example would be budgets. So you plan, you start with a plan. One of the things that, in my opinion, is a key principle of agile is stability in the teams, right? To allow them time to learn and to embrace not just the ways of working, but even the domain knowledge, right? So
True.
specifically in financial services, you want your teams to become experts in what they are doing.
Yeah.
So, as an example, if a project, suddenly the budget is cut or the budget changes or something that is in that moment in your journey outside your agile construction or
Yeah.
construct, that create that in my experience, and I'm as you mentioned in my introduction, I'm a technologist. So in my experience, typically what happens is the teams will default to I will call it a survival mindset, meaning they will park the ways they've worked and
Yeah.
up to that moment, and they will reorganize themselves in a way where they believe they can still achieve their objectives with the new rules, right? With the new, so budget was reduced, what can we still deliver, and then let's organize ourselves in a way that better, it puts us in a better position to deliver the initiative.
Yeah.
However, I think, as you said, this is a trap, because after some time,
Hmm.
um, you will go back uh, if- to the initial problems, right? So, as I said to you, the ideal journey, an organization should start by identifying that they need something different.
Yeah.
And I think if you divert from the agile for any reason,
Hmm.
you will sooner or later go back to this step one, go back to, we need something different, this is not working again, and
Yeah.
then you restart the whole process. So I think the difficult issue you will see in many and this is common big and small organizations, is understand that your constraints change, the rules of the game change, but try and stick with the basics of agile, right? Try not change your operating model, if it makes sense.
Yeah.
Even though again scope may change, teams, you may need to change some teams, but the model, right, the
Yeah.
operating model should stay and should be persistent and should be resilient. It's resilience is a word that we hear a lot these days.
Yeah.
Organization should be resilient in this sense, which is, if the initial plan does not go as expected,
Hmm.
it's fine, you can evolve your agile model, but don't park it, don't go back to waterfall. It will not help you. Sooner or later you will have to restart this journey again.
That's a great thought, and you will obviously fail at times. You will have pitfalls, but the idea, like you said, is not to let go of the operating model and not shift back to the older mindset. Rui, I'm so glad we had this conversation. I'm also hopeful that everyone who watches this will actually take away the concepts that you've talked about. And I'm sure both of us will continue to have many such conversations in the future as well. Extremely thankful for you to join us on our first podcast. And to all the viewers, we'll be coming back with a new guest soon. But till then, definitely like, share, and comment our podcast for better reach. And it'll be great to hear feedback and comment from our viewers as well. Thanks, Rui. Thanks all. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Shlok.
Thanks.